Welcome to Tea Time, my friends, a place where I muse about my gender transition experience and in the process aim to comfort and inspire others to a greater level of self-awareness. I am Artemis, enjoying a cup of blueberries and cream tea, courtesy of the Rose and Vine Gift Company. This video, brought to you by a recent experience I had while visiting Walt Disney World, and it was an eye-opener, and not in a Snow White awakens to her prince kind of moment, either. Are you ever just bopping along, enjoying your day, and suddenly you see something that clicks into place several other pieces of seemingly random information that culminate in an "at last I see the light" kind of moment? Except less romantic boat ride and more the horror of repeated "it's a small world after all" kind of feeling? Well, it hit me as I was on the monorail back to the car from Magic Kingdom and watched a 4-year-old boy playing a realistic shoot-to-kill game on an electronic device as his parents paid no mind to him in the stroller. There are many things I feel I could question about that entire scene, but the one I'm going to focus on in this video is the influence Disney has, in my opinion, in raising children through media, and later specifically how Luisa from Encanto demonstrates the struggle young girls are facing in an age of underappreciated femininity paired with a push towards transgender medicalization. I realized throughout time that children have not been constantly monitored by their parents, which might be why the saying, "it takes a village to raise a child," exists. I cannot imagine any one human being possessing the ability to dedicate enough attention around the clock for an entire decade or more. In ages past, kids were booted outside by parents to play, explore the world, and interact with one another, learning perhaps much like kittens, cubs, and pups by trial and error. Today, an entirely different world exists where children can pick up a device and, without parental controls, gain access to mature content. Or, as I recently heard in a story on Google, order over $500 worth of takeout food from delivery apps. I've watched very young children work technology that would have made my high school-aged self look like a caveman. And even without that ability, if you were a kid raised by Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel back in the 90s, you're now of childbearing age and may have fond memories of such television programming. Signing up for Disney Plus and allowing your little one to watch based only on your nostalgia of what it used to be like, without any supervision by you, might seem reasonable. There are two things that I would like to bring to the table for your consideration. One, our memory of what something was like as a child compares drastically different to how that same material is viewed from adult eyes. Two, the fact that it's called television programming takes on a whole new meaning when you realize that children's brains are quite literally wired to be programmed for the first 8 or so years of life, according to the accepted theory of child development. I recently watched a YouTube documentary on a Disney show from my childhood called Adventures in Wonderland, and what to my child self was just fun songs, colors, and lively actors and actresses was now being seen very differently from my adult perspective for the messages that they were teaching. One such episode was entitled "White Rabbits Can't Jump," featuring pre-accusation O.J. Simpson. Disney likely wouldn't touch that today if their paychecks depended on it, and yet this was the material on after-school and weekend television spots that any number of parents left their children to watch without any follow-up context from them. Today, with streaming content, Disney is putting out more media than ever. It's available at any time, and easier than ever for an adult to hand their young child a device to be kept busy for hours in this way, loosely keeping an eye on them but not closely monitoring the content they're consuming. Cue the movie Encanto, another piece of media available on the platform. If Schoolhouse Rock were to make a theme song for this film, instead of teaching parts of speech, it might be searching the DSM-5 with "dysfunction junction, what's the malfunction?" While I appreciate the seeming cultural shift to more openness of communicating our mental, emotional struggles, I do not believe it belongs in a film easily accessible to or marketed towards children, especially children who are not having educational discussions about it with a competent adult afterwards to digest what they've seen. I say this because after watching one of the more popular songs in the movie called Surface Pressure, I immediately saw how the theme in the song intersects today's version of feminism and the social contagion of medicalized gender transitioning. I should clarify. I believe that it's important for these portrayals and discussions to be taking place. The problem I see is that children have unsupervised access to this content, and the follow up conversations from adults are not happening, leaving children to process their feelings about what they've seen on their own, or maybe worse, using the characters as their teachers and taking the limited solutions presented within the film as a one size fits all. To begin analyzing the imagery and lyrics of the song Surface Pressure and relate them to the themes of today that I mentioned, I'll start with the opening. We see a masculinized female character named Louisa power posing with a noticeably beefier physique than the main heroine character. She mentions crushing diamonds, and while we have come to understand this to mean a certain standard of toughness because of how hard diamonds are, they're also a Western symbol of marriage, being the most common stone placed in wedding rings. In New Age feminism, women have been encouraged to shirk the tradition of being proposed to and betrothed like property. And the claim of destroying diamonds could serve both the purpose of demonstrating strength and independence of a traditional system. Quickly, though, Louisa professes that under the surface, with her responsibilities and expectations, she feels berserk like a tightrope walker in a three-ring circus. The shot quickly moves to showing Hercules in front of Cerberus, the three-headed beast who guards the gates of the underworld, where she ponders if Hercules ever actually wanted to fight the Hellhound. Hercules, the male demigod associated with hyper-masculinity, runs screaming from the fight, where Louisa picks up the sword and fights the dog herself. Here, we see the emasculation of a male character and a masculinized female literally picking up the sword to carry the fight. The imagery here is powerful, in my opinion, and while some might see empowerment of women, given the lyrics of the rest of the song, I see a female longing to relinquish the masculine role for which she has been pigeonholed, not understanding that her misery may be stemming from being unable to embrace femininity in its social roles, for which she may actually feel fulfilled in performing. I say this because her very next line is, "I'm pretty sure I'm worthless if I can't be of service." This may be a theme felt by many irrespective of sex, but within the framework of gender roles, as humans we generally feel optimally fulfilled when we are giving in ways that fit our natural inclinations. I'm going to speak in terms of feminine and masculine here because gender roles are not dependent on what sex you are, though there can be general correlations. If you naturally fit a feminine gender role, you tend to be more nurturing, care about people more than objects or things. You're more empathetic and are skilled at communicating emotions and have good listening skills. If you fit a more masculine gender role, you are more goal and action oriented. You take greater risks, care more about projects than people, and seek solutions to perceived problems. Neither is better than the other, in my opinion, and both are needed for a balanced societal structure. For Louisa, she may feel useless if she cannot be of service in the way she is demonstrating throughout the song, lifting hyperbolically large weights and being physically tough, and she feels constantly on edge of total collapse. In my opinion, this is not the role a person of feminine inclination would feel most fulfilled by. While many mothers and women in general certainly can feel stressed within their feminine roles by trying to hold a family together, like Louisa, in my opinion, the stress she is feeling is because she's being forced into a masculine role where she isn't happiest or even healthiest. She's been forced there by family, by her culture, by society that tells her this is empowering and will make her happiest, much like the New Age feminism today. I think this assertion is supported by lyrics in the middle of the song where she says, "If I could shake this crushing weight, of expectations, would that free up some room for joy or relaxation or simple pleasure? Personally, I also believe that the feminine is the seat of inspiration for joy, beauty, pleasure, and sensuality. These are not pursuits of the masculine. I mean, how many straight men have you seen who are good at creating an environment that smells and looks inviting? And this is no criticism of the masculine, whose strength instead is in physically building, exploration, and expansion. Here again, as I have talked about in other videos, I believe we have been along for the ride of a pendulum swinging from one side to the other on defining femininity. On one side of the stroke is the age of a woman's place is barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, and the other is boss lady with bigger balls than breasts. In my opinion, the middle ground is lots of women probably want to have a stable mate and children, and some will just want to do their own thing, and that's great too. I don't think that's too much to ask of what I would consider a healthy society. It harkens back to my constant message of appreciating gender nonconforming behaviors for the contributions they bring, rather than trying to find a one-size-fits-all. I think it would go a long way to fixing a lot of psychosomatic and societal ills. I also find it terribly ironic that today's feminism actually encourages hypermasculinity and discourages healthy femininity. If you're interested in a long-form discussion of feminism today and what healthy feminism and femininity might look like, here's a link above to a live discussion I did with my wife where we each also talk about our more traditional masculine-feminine dynamic. So, how does this hyper-masculinization of women and the feminine relate to transgenderism? I tried putting myself back in my teenage shoes, but in today's world, seeing Louisa and relating to her struggle and being exposed to medicalized gender transitioning. And here's where that horrible sinking feeling hit me, like the boulders Louisa was carrying. I may very well have reasoned that if such masculine things were expected of me and I couldn't handle the pressure, perhaps I should have been born a male. I could have thought then that the transitioning was the answer, and my problems could be solved if I followed the lie of being able to change sex and become a male, instead of realizing that my struggle was actually just coming from societal expectations. Even for me, though transitioning has improved my quality of life, I still think I would have wondered as an adult if it were the right choice for me had I gotten access to these interventions at such a young age. It would have been easy for me to fall into thinking that transitioning was a logical course of action because I had similar resulting pressures as Louisa. I was the oldest child with younger sisters from teen parents, with a father who would be absent for long stretches of time on military duty. And for me, I felt I had to be tough and responsible, especially because I wanted to emulate those qualities to win his affection. Perhaps me wanting to emulate him was a feature of my inclination towards masculinity, but all the more reason then perhaps that I may have thought I was born the wrong sex. I can see female children who are simply more masculine leaning in this way who would be harmed by taking testosterone and having sex reassignment surgeries, and may best be left simply accepted as the person they naturally are, happy to fulfill a more masculine role without medicalization. Then, there may be Louisas, women who are stepping into a masculine role while they would actually be happiest within a feminine role. I recognize that the lyrics in this song and the imagery that accompanies it can be interpreted in different ways. The point I'm trying to make is that without a parent discussing the messages with their child, I was able to relate to this character through the lens of transgenderism and New Age feminism. If I had this experience, I would be willing to bet that others have had it too. Children are literally programming their brains for that first nearly decade that could dictate the rest of their lives. If I was a parent not actively assisting in that programming, to the best of my knowledge, I wouldn't rest easy knowing that someone or something else with selfish motives of their own is taking liberty to write that code.